Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Chess with Konstantin. We've had a little delay between videos. It was caused by various real-life issues. Ultimately my even computer broke down and I had to rebuild it from scratch, and there were some episodes of illness, but thankfully I am back and now we are going to make some good videos for you guys. Today's video we are going to take a look at a concept called the double checkmate. Now, I'm sure you've all heard of the checkmate, but what in fact is a double checkmate and what does it get you? Well, to understand what a double checkmate is, you have to understand the concept of double check. So, when the king is in check, that means the king is threatened by your opponent's piece. And the ways to resolve the check are to move out of the way or to capture the opposing piece. A checkmate, of course, happens when there are no good squares to run away to because they're all threatened and it's impossible to capture the piece that is threatening the king. A double check happens when the king comes into check from two different sources simultaneously. And that means that one of the ways to get out of it, that is capturing the offending piece, is impossible because even if that piece were to be captured, there is still the other piece that is threatening the check. And of course, the double checkmate happens when the king is in checkmate, but is in checkmate from two different sources simultaneously. It doesn't really get you extra points or anything. It's just pretty much a rare phenomenon that gives you bragging rights. You could say, hey, you know, I not only did I checkmate somebody, but in fact I double checkmated them. And here is one of my games from Lichess that illustrates this concept. I do apologize for my name. I am actually half Russian, but you know, when I chose this name, obviously the war in Ukraine didn't take place, and you know, I no longer identify as a Russian. In fact, I'm ashamed of that part of my heritage. But you know, it's impossible to change your name on Lichess, so I am Crazy Russian on there. Alright, so let's take a look at this game. This game was against Georgios Armanio. He is a pretty good player. He was rated about 2200 on Lichess, so about a high expert to maybe a master in real life. And the game began with pawn to e4, normal king pawn opening, and I played g6. This is actually an opening system I created for black that is a universal system, which means you can play it against almost anything white plays and get decent positions. And the game continued pawn to f4, g6, bishop g7, knight to f3, and now pawn to e6. Usually people play pawn to d6 here instead, and actually this would be transposed to what's called the modern defense. The idea being just you are flexible, and rather than attacking the center right away with your pawns, black kind of develops his pieces on active squares and tries to attack the center indirectly, with the idea that later on he will try to break through somehow. But you know, the key feature of this opening is to instead play e6 because it frees up the square for the knight here on e7, and the idea is to push d5 and castle, not clear in what order, and then try to attack the center with maybe c5 and then develop the knight to c6 or to d7. So this is kind of the idea of the system. Also, like if white tries to play opening moves that attack the f7 pawn, I mean, you will never run into a 3-move checkmate with this system because, for example, bishop c4 and queen f3 or queen h5 don't work because these light squares are defended. So you know, this can be a quite good system for beginners who don't want to be checkmated in the early game. Alright, so we have e6, and then white is very aggressive and played d4. This is a very correct approach to control the center. And I played knight to e7 and even c4 here. So you can see white has this giant center with the hedgehog with the pawns, and really is controlling the center, and has much more space than black. But you know, black is ahead in development. 4 of white's moves have been by pawns, and only 1 of the white's pieces is out. And in contrast, black with the castle has already completed most of his development. So now we have knight to c3, and now very important to attack the center. Finally, pawn to d5. This is the best move. Computer agrees that this is the best move. And the idea is that you're going to now open up the center, and you know, if this diagonal can be opened up, then black's pieces will equalize the position, and black will be you know, at least equal. And the game continued e5. This is very correct. It would be a mistake to capture here, because you know, with the open center, black just equalizes the game, and white has to kind of justify why you know, it's better. So pawn to e5, and now c5. Again, it looks like this is gambiting the c5 pawn, and you know, this is fine, because black very often will give up the pawn in this position. But the idea is that white will remove one of the defenders from the e-pawn, and then black can continue with pawn to f6 and try to break through here and open up the center. So even though black will be pawn down temporarily, nevertheless it's fine to give up the pawn. And white does take the pawn, and now we have knight to c6. Okay, another idea was to play knight to d7 instead, attacking this pawn. And now after pawn to b4 defending it, you could play something like pawn to f6 or a5. But you know, this is fine. This is also fine. Knight to c6. With the idea that I will play pawn to f6 and try to open up this dark squared bishop. And now white makes a mistake. Okay, so you always have to be careful, very careful, when you move your kingside pawns, especially the f pawn and the g pawn, and especially if you ever move them out together, because if you do that, it weakens this diagonal and this key square f2 square around the king. And the problem, there is no problem if there are no checks here. But you know, if black can place moves like queen to h4 check, you know, if this knight, imagine if this knight wasn't here, queen could come here, or even if my bishop was on f6, then you know, bishop check. This could be very dangerous for white. So always be very careful when you move these two pawns for white, or these two pawns for black. So black continues with the plan to open up the center with f6, and now e takes f6, not allowing this this capture, which was quite good for black. And bishop takes f6. Notice that my bishop is now on a very active square, and probably white should play pawn to g5 here, attacking the bishop and forcing it to either retreat, well, forcing it to retreat. Of course, black also has the option of capturing here, which would result in white having triple pawns on the c file, which is a quite terrible pawn structure, and you know, these pawns will be very vulnerable to capture, basically destroying the entire queen side. So already it looks like black is at least equal here, even though white has for the moment more space. And now we have h3 and you know, b6. The idea behind b6 is it frees up squares for the bishop, and also, you know, if white captures here, then black will capture with queen takes b6 and have a very powerful, very active queen piece. So he captures and queen captures, and now look at that. So queen is looking at this pawn, so if the white's bishop ever moves, this pawn gets captured. Also, queen is looking to the vulnerable f2 square, and we have the rook putting indirect pressure on that square as well. And now, you know, you can look at themes like knight to d4 to try to get this knight away and try to start some attacks. So we have queen to b3 and knight to d4. Again, continuing with this plan. Now, okay, it looks like, well, what happens if simply queen takes queen here? You may think that, you know, this is like a mistake, but this is nothing, because actually there is this knight takes knight check and then capture the queen. You know, queen takes queen is not really an option here. Knight takes d4, and now queen takes d4. Maintaining this, avoiding the queen trade, maintaining this visual, and now we have this threat. Is bishop to h4 check. Really, after knight takes on d4, I could have played check right away, and I probably should have played bishop to h4 check right away. So actually queen takes d4 right away is maybe a little inaccuracy, but okay. Queen takes d4, and now of course this is a mistake. I think white had to play pawn to h4 here, you know, however ugly that may seem, or at least g4, I mean g5, because you cannot allow this check. If you allow this check, then you know, the game is lost. But, you know, white captured on d5, and now bishop h4 check. Now look at this position. I mean, it's already obvious that because white wasted all those moves in the opening, pushing the pawns instead of getting the king to safety. Now the king is quite vulnerable in its position in the center of the board. And now after this check, it's not clear where the king can run. So really the only square is king to e2, which is what was played. But now, of course, we have bishop a6 check, and you can see the beautiful square of control that the bishops provide here. So this is quite strong. White elected to play knight to b5, blocking the bishop. Okay, it's a reasonable response. Of course, if king played to f3, then we have this wonderful queen to f2 check, which is quite devastating. So knight to b5, and now queen f2 check anyway. And king d1, queen to e1 check, king to c2, rook to c8 check, and now of course you cannot retreat back here because it will be checkmate right away. And after king to d3, we have knight captures on d5, and after a silly move like a3, which, I mean, there are no moves here for white. You know, any move loses, like move like bishop e2 loses the rook immediately. You know, move like bishop to d2 loses the other rook. There are no really good moves here for white. So after a3, we have rook f to d8, and after bishop g2, attacking the queen. This is actually knight to takes f4 check, but it's actually checkmate, and not only is it checkmate, it is a double checkmate. Because the king is in check from the knight, but also from the rook. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is what a double checkmate looks like. A double checkmate against a semi-master. And, you know, now I get bragging rights, I suppose. So if you run into such open positions in your own games, do try to attack the opponent's king. And, you know, if you do get the opportunity, do try to get them into a double checkmate. It's a quite rewarding and fun experience. Well, I hope you learned something from this video, and I will see you in our next videos, which will focus on the art of attacking play in chess. All right.